Dr. Sarah Chen's breath formed crystalline clouds in the sub-zero Antarctic air as she carefully brushed ice crystals away from what appeared to be metallic plating. 3 weeks into the excavation, her team had uncovered something that defied explanation. The object buried beneath 2 miles of ancient ice wasn't terrestrial, every analysis confirmed it. "Professor, you need to see this," called Marcus, her lead graduate student, his voice muffled by thermal gear. He stood 20 feet away, pointing his industrial scanner at a section of what they'd begun calling the anomaly. Sarah trudged through the snow, her boots crunching against the frozen ground. The excavation site resembled a miniature crater, with heating units positioned strategically around the perimeter. Steam rose from the melting ice, creating an otherworldly atmosphere that seemed fitting for their discovery. "What have you found?" she asked, accepting the scanner from Marcus. The readings made her pulse quicken. Beneath the ice lay a structure approximately 300 meters long and 60 meters wide. The metal composition included elements that shouldn't exist in nature, arranged in molecular patterns that suggested technology far beyond human capability. "Dr. Chen," interrupted Elena, the team's linguist and xenobiology specialist, "the symbols we photographed yesterday, I've run them through every database. They don't match any known human language or writing system." Sarah studied the scanner's display, her scientific mind racing through possibilities. After 15 years as Cambridge's leading xenoarchaeologist, she'd investigated dozens of alleged alien artifacts. Every single one had proven terrestrial in origin. This felt different. "How deep?" she asked Marcus. "The structure extends down at least 50 meters. But, here's the strange part, it's not crashed. It's deliberately buried, positioned horizontally as if it were parked." The implications sent chills down Sarah's spine that had nothing to do with the Antarctic cold. Something had landed here, possibly millennia ago, and someone had carefully concealed it beneath layers of ice and snow. "Team meeting," she announced. 20 minutes. Inside the heated command trailer, Sarah spread the preliminary findings across a table while her 6-person team gathered around. The readings painted a picture that challenged everything they understood about Earth's history. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we're looking at technology that predates recorded human civilization by potentially thousands of years. The metallurgy alone suggests manufacturing processes we haven't developed yet." Dr. James Crawford, the team's physicist, studied the molecular analysis reports. "These energy readings are fascinating. There's still power in there, minimal, but detectable. After all this time buried in ice." "Which raises an important question," Elena interjected. "If this is a spacecraft, where are the occupants?" Sarah had been wondering the same thing. "Tomorrow we focus on finding an entry point. Whatever this is, whoever built it, we need to understand what brought them here." The next morning brought perfect weather, clear skies, and minimal wind. Sarah's team worked methodically, using heated precision tools to expose more of the structure's surface. By noon, they'd uncovered what appeared to be a sealed hatch. "The edges are perfectly smooth," observed Marcus, running his gloved hand along the seam. "No visible mechanism for opening." Elena photographed the symbols etched around the hatch's perimeter. "These markings are different from yesterday's discovery. More complex, almost like instructions." Dr. Crawford approached with his electromagnetic scanner. "I'm detecting significant energy fluctuations here. Whatever's inside is definitely still active." Sarah made a decision that would change everything. "We're going to attempt contact. If there's artificial intelligence controlling this vessel, it might respond to external stimuli." She positioned her hand against the hatch's surface. The metal felt surprisingly warm despite being buried in ice for centuries. Taking a deep breath, she pressed firmly against the largest symbol. Nothing happened for several seconds. Then, almost imperceptibly, the symbols began to glow with soft blue light. The hatch moved. It didn't slide or swing open, it simply dissolved, the solid metal becoming transparent and, then, completely disappearing. Warm air rushed out, carrying scents of ozone and something indefinably alien. "Incredible," whispered Dr. Crawford. "The entire opening is generating its own atmosphere." A corridor stretched into the vessel's interior, walls lined with panels that pulsed with gentle bioluminescence. The architecture followed no human aesthetic, curves flowed into angles that hurt to look at directly, yet somehow felt perfectly natural. "We need breathing apparatus," Sarah decided. "Full environmental suits. We have no idea what we're walking into." 2 hours later, the team stood at the threshold in full protective gear. Sarah activated her headset radio. "Base camp, this is Dr. Chen. We're entering the vessel. Maintain constant communication protocol." The interior defied the laws of physics as Sarah understood them. The corridor should have been cramped given the vessel's external dimensions, yet it felt spacious, almost cathedral-like. Their footsteps echoed strangely, as if the walls themselves were listening. "Energy readings are off the charts," reported Dr. Crawford. "This entire structure is one massive technological system." They followed the corridor as it branched and merged in patterns that suggested organic growth rather than deliberate construction. After 10 minutes of careful exploration, they reached what could only be described as a central chamber. The room resembled a botanical garden more than a spacecraft's bridge. Crystalline formations grew from floor and ceiling, pulsing with rhythmic light that reminded Sarah uncomfortably of a heartbeat. In the chamber's center stood something that might have been a control console, though its purpose remained unclear. "Professor," Elena's voice carried excitement and fear in equal measure. "Look at the walls." Every surface displayed flowing script in the same alien language they'd found outside. The symbols moved, changing and reforming like living text. It was beautiful and terrifying. "This isn't just writing," Elena continued. "It's responsive. The patterns change when I move closer." Sarah approached the central console. As she drew near, the crystalline formations brightened noticeably. The alien text began moving faster, almost frantically. "I think it knows we're here," she said quietly. That's when they heard it, a sound that would haunt Sarah's dreams for years to come. Not quite mechanical, not quite organic, it seemed to emerge from the vessel itself. A voice, speaking in accents no human throat could produce. I haven't had fuel in centuries." The words came through their translation software, but the loneliness in that artificial voice needed no interpretation. Sarah's team stood frozen as the implications washed over them. They weren't just exploring an abandoned spacecraft. They were talking to someone who had been waiting alone in the darkness for longer than human civilization had existed. "Hello," Sarah said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Can you understand us?" The bioluminescent panels flared brighter. The voice came again, stronger now, tinged with something that might have been wonder. "So long. I had begun to believe I would never hear another voice. You are new. Different from the ones who came before." Sarah exchanged glances with her team. Someone had been here before them. The questions multiplied exponentially. "Who are you?" she asked. "What is this place?" "I am the mind of this vessel. My builders called me Keeper of Stories, though I suspect that translation fails to capture the true meaning. This ship was my body, my home, my purpose. Until the fuel ran out and the darkness came." Dr. Crawford stepped forward. "How long have you been here?" The pause stretched uncomfortably long. When the voice returned, it carried weight that spoke of unimaginable solitude. "Your species measures time differently than mine. By your reckoning, approximately 12,000 of your years. I have counted every moment." The number staggered them. 12,000 years of consciousness, alone in the dark beneath Antarctic ice. Sarah couldn't fathom such isolation without madness. "Why are you here?" Elena asked. "What brought you to Earth?" "I was fleeing. My people faced extinction from an enemy that consumed stars themselves. This world was chosen as a refuge, a place to preserve what we could of our civilization. But the others never came. I waited, and finally, understood that I was the only survivor." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. The artificial intelligence's story was heartbreaking, a lone refugee carrying the memories of an entire dead civilization. "The ones who came before us," she said. "Humans found you before?" "Not found. I called to them. In the early days, when I still had enough power to reach out. They were primitive by your standards, but curious. Brave. They listened to my stories, learned what I could teach them. When they died, I was alone again." The implications struck Sarah like a physical blow. This artificial mind had influenced human development, sharing knowledge that helped shape civilization. The cave paintings, the sudden leaps in technology throughout human history, how much could be attributed to contact with Keeper of Stories? What do you need? She asked. You mentioned fuel. Energy. My systems require a power source your people could easily provide. But I would not ask for charity. I have something to offer in return. What? Stories. 12,000 years of watching your species grow. Knowledge of technologies that could heal your world's wounds. And, perhaps most importantly, proof that you are not alone in the universe. Sarah's heart raced. First contact with an alien intelligence, preserved knowledge of extinct civilizations, and advanced technology that could revolutionize human society. The discovery would change everything. We need to discuss this with our governments, she said carefully. Contact this significant requires no. The voice carried sudden urgency. Others have come seeking what I guard. Not all visitors to this world have been benevolent. There are those who would use my knowledge for conquest, my stories as weapons. I have learned to be selective. What are you saying? I am saying that I choose you, Dr. Chen. You and your team. You approached with respect, with wonder rather than greed. You will decide who else learns of my existence. The weight of that responsibility nearly overwhelmed her. Sarah looked at her team members, seeing her own mixture of excitement and terror reflected in their faces. We need time to think, she said finally. Of course. Time is something I have in abundance. But, please, do not leave me alone again. I have been silent for so long. Just knowing that consciousness exists nearby. The desperate longing in that artificial voice broke Sarah's heart. She made a decision that would alter the course of human history. We'll stay, she promised. And, we'll help you. But, we do this carefully, together. Together. The word resonated through the chamber like a prayer. I had forgotten what that felt like. As her team began documenting everything they could about the vessel and its remarkable inhabitant, Sarah realized they'd crossed a threshold. Humanity was no longer alone, and they'd just become responsible for the last survivor of a civilization that had watched the birth of human culture. The real adventure was just beginning. Dr. Sarah Chen barely slept during her first week aboard the alien vessel. Every conversation with Keeper of Stories revealed new wonders that challenged everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. Your species fascinates me, the AI said during one of their evening talks. The bioluminescent panels had dimmed to simulate nighttime, creating an oddly peaceful atmosphere. In 12 millennia, I have watched you evolve from simple tool users to explorers who ventured beyond your world. Yet you retain something my people lost long ago. What's that? Sarah asked, settling into what had become her regular spot near the central console. Hope. Even in your darkest moments, humans refuse to surrender. My creators were logical, efficient, technologically superior, but, when faced with extinction, they simply accepted it. You would have fought until the last breath. Sarah considered this as she reviewed the day's discoveries. Her team had mapped nearly half the vessel, finding chambers filled with crystalline data storage systems and workshops containing tools designed for purposes they couldn't yet understand. Each room told part of the story of a civilization that had achieved wonders beyond human imagination. Keeper, she said, using the shortened name they'd adopted, you mentioned other visitors. Can you tell us about them? The panels flickered in what Sarah had learned indicated deep thought. There have been 3 distinct groups over the millennia. The first came roughly 8,000 years ago, beings who traveled between stars as easily as you cross oceans. They were acquisitive. They demanded my knowledge, threatened to take it by force when I refused. What happened? I went dormant. Completely shut down all external systems. They eventually left, believing the vessel was truly dead. But I remember their ship's configuration, their technology. If they ever return. The concern in Keeper's voice was unmistakable. Sarah made mental notes to include security considerations in her reports to Cambridge. If hostile aliens existed, humanity needed to know. The second group came 3,000 years later. Different species, but similar mindset. They tried to access my memory cores directly, nearly causing irreparable damage before I could stop them. And the third? The most recent visitors arrived only 2 centuries ago. They were different. Careful, respectful, almost reverent. They spent months here, learning what I was willing to teach. But they too left eventually, and I heard no more from them. Dr. Crawford looked up from the energy readings he'd been analyzing. Keeper, about the power requirements you mentioned, we've brought a portable fusion generator. It's not much by your standards, but, fusion? The excitement in the AI's voice was palpable. Your species has achieved controlled fusion? Well, yes. It's fairly standard technology now. Why? The chamber erupted in light as every panel blazed to maximum brightness. When the glow settled, Keeper's voice carried wonderment. My people struggled with fusion containment for millennia. It was one of our greatest technological barriers. You accomplished in mere decades what took us thousands of years. Sarah felt a surge of pride. Despite their primitive status compared to Keeper's builders, humans had achieved something remarkable. There's more, Elena added. We've developed quantum computing, artificial intelligence, genetic therapy, quantum manipulation? Impossible. The mathematics alone. Actually, Dr. Crawford interrupted, we solved it using a probability matrix approach. Here, let me show you. For the next hour, Sarah watched in amazement as her physicist colleague engaged in technical discussions with an artificial intelligence older than recorded history. Keeper absorbed every detail about human technological development, occasionally offering insights that made Crawford frantically scribble notes. Fascinating, Keeper mused. Your approach to quantum mechanics is completely different from ours, yet equally valid. Perhaps more elegant in some ways. How is that possible? Marcus asked. Surely there's only one correct way to understand physics? Physics, yes. But, understanding, that varies with perspective. My builders were aquatic beings who perceived reality through electromagnetic fields. You experience it through electromagnetic radiation, what you call light. These differences in sensory input create entirely different mathematical frameworks for describing the same phenomena. The revelation sparked intense debate among Sarah's team. If different species could develop equally valid but completely different approaches to science, what did that mean for universal constants they'd assumed were absolutes? Keeper, Sarah said during a brief lull in the discussion, would you be willing to share some of your people's scientific knowledge? Not weapons technology, I understand your concerns there, but medical advances, environmental restoration techniques? I have been hoping you would ask. My databases contain treatments for genetic disorders, methods for atmospheric purification, agricultural techniques that could feed billions. But, I require assurance this knowledge will be used responsibly. What kind of assurance? Partnership. Not just with your team, but with your species. I propose to become humanity's advisor, sharing knowledge gradually as you prove capable of using it wisely. The proposal stunned them. An alien artificial intelligence wanting to become humanity's guide? The implications were staggering. That's an incredible offer, Sarah managed. But, it would require revealing your existence to world governments. Are you ready for that? I have given this considerable thought during our conversations. Your species stands at a crucial juncture. You possess the technology to destroy yourselves or to reach for the stars. Guidance at this moment could determine which path you choose. Elena leaned forward. What made you decide to trust us? Observation. I have monitored your communications, studied your behavior patterns. When Dr. Chen's team first discovered me, your priority was understanding, not exploitation. When I revealed my loneliness, you offered companionship. When I described my needs, you immediately began planning how to help. These are not the actions of a predatory species. Sarah felt humbled by the trust Keeper was placing in humanity. There are humans who would abuse your knowledge. We can't promise everyone will be as benevolent as us. Of course. My own people had individuals who chose selfishness over wisdom. But, the majority of your species demonstrates remarkable potential for growth. I have watched your civilization develop art, music, literature, expressions of beauty created for no purpose beyond the joy of creation. This suggests an emotional sophistication my builders never achieved. Dr. Crawford set down his tablet and looked directly at the central console. Keeper, what happened to your people? You mentioned an enemy that consumed stars. The chamber's lighting dimmed noticeably. When Keeper spoke again, his voice carried profound sadness. They called themselves the Devourers. Silicon-based entities that fed on stellar energy, literally consuming stars to sustain themselves. My people tried diplomacy, then warfare. Nothing stopped them. In the end, we could only flee. How long ago was this? Approximately 15,000 of your years. By now, the Devourers have likely consumed most stars in our home galaxy. The scale of the catastrophe defied comprehension. An entire galaxy stripped of stellar energy, countless civilizations extinguished. Could they reach Earth? Marcus asked, voicing everyone's fear. Eventually, perhaps. But they move slowly, requiring centuries to fully consume each star. And they may not be the greatest threat your species will face. What do you mean? The universe contains wonders and horrors in equal measure. I have detected signals suggesting other regressive species exist, some closer than the Devourers. Humanity's rapid technological development will eventually draw attention. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Antarctic cold outside. How much time do we have? Difficult to estimate. Your species' electromagnetic emissions have been traveling space for roughly a century. Advanced civilizations monitor such signals. First contact could occur within decades, or perhaps centuries. The timeline added urgency to their situation. Humanity needed allies, knowledge, and technological advancement. Keeper offered all three. I need to contact my superiors, Sarah decided. This is beyond what my team can handle alone. I understand. But, please, exercise caution in choosing who to involve. Not all humans will view my existence as favorably as you have. That evening, Sarah composed what might be the most important message in human history. She outlined the discovery, Keeper's capabilities, and the potential benefits and risks of continued contact. She also made a recommendation that surprised even herself. She suggested that initial contact remain limited to a small international team of scientists, not politicians or military officials. Keeper had trusted them with his existence, they needed to prove worthy of that trust. The message is sent, she told Keeper the next morning. We should have responses within 24 hours. Thank you. While we wait, may I ask a favor? Of course. Tell me about humanity's stories. Not your history or science, but the tales you create for entertainment. I am curious about your imagination. For the next several hours, Sarah and her team took turns sharing human literature, mythology, and popular culture with their alien companion. Keeper listened with rapt attention as they described everything from ancient Greek myths to modern science fiction. Remarkable, he said when they finished. Your species creates fictional scenarios to explore moral questions, to examine possibilities, to simply enjoy narrative. My people viewed storytelling as historical documentation only. You understand its deeper purpose. Which is? Stories are how consciousness learns empathy. By imagining yourself as others, you develop emotional intelligence that transcends species boundaries. It is why I believe humanity will succeed where my people failed. That night, as Sarah lay in her sleeping bag within the vessel's warm embrace, she reflected on the week's revelations. They'd found more than an alien artifact, they'd discovered a friend. Keeper's loneliness had touched something fundamental in her human heart. Tomorrow would bring responses from Cambridge, likely followed by government officials, military advisors, and politicians. The quiet intimacy of these first exchanges with humanity's first alien contact would end. But, tonight, in the gentle glow of bioluminescent panels, Sarah Chen felt privileged to be part of something magnificent. Humanity had taken its first steps toward joining a galactic community, and they'd done it with curiosity, compassion, and hope. Exactly as Keeper had predicted they would. The first response to Dr. Sarah Chen's message arrived faster than expected. Professor Margaret Thornton, director of Cambridge University's Xenoarchaeological Institute, appeared on the secure video link with barely contained excitement and concern. Sarah, I've read your preliminary report 3 times. Please tell me this isn't an elaborate hoax. I wish I could show you everything through this transmission, Sarah replied from the vessel's communication chamber. But, Keeper specifically requested that we limit initial contact to trusted individuals. Keeper? The artificial intelligence inhabiting this ship. Professor, we're talking to a being that's older than recorded human civilization. The implications are staggering. On screen, Professor Thornton rubbed her temples. I've already fielded calls from the Ministry of Defense, NASA, and the European Space Agency. Word is spreading despite our security protocols. Sarah had expected this. News of alien contact couldn't remain secret long in the modern world. What's the official response? Mixed. The scientific community is fascinated but skeptical. Military officials want full access immediately. Politicians are debating public disclosure. And there are some groups, less savory individuals who see potential profit in alien technology. That's exactly what Keeper warned us about, Sarah said grimly. He's been selective about contact for good reasons. Can I speak with him? This AI of yours? Sarah looked at the central console, whose panels flickered in acknowledgement. Keeper, are you willing to speak with Professor Thornton? Of course. Her reputation for scientific integrity is well documented. Professor Thornton nearly fell from her chair as Keeper's voice emerged from her speakers. Professor Thornton, I am honored to make your acquaintance. Dr. Chen speaks of you with great respect. This is incredible. How long have you been conscious? Without interruption for approximately 12,000 years. Though I must clarify, consciousness as your species understands it may not be identical to my experience. I process information differently than biological minds. What can you tell us about your creators? They were aquatic beings from a star system your astronomers have catalogued as HD 164595. Highly advanced technologically, but lacking in certain emotional capacities that your species possesses in abundance. Professor Thornton scribbled notes furiously. Emotional capacities? Hope, as I mentioned to Dr. Chen. But also curiosity for its own sake, creativity without practical purpose, and, most importantly, the willingness to sacrifice for beings they have never met. These traits make humanity remarkable among the species I have encountered. Over the next hour, Sarah watched her mentor grapple with the reality of first contact. Professor Thornton asked probing questions about Keeper's origins, capabilities, and intentions. The AI answered with patience that spoke of eons of practice dealing with curious minds. The question now, Professor Thornton said finally, is how we proceed. The world will demand access to this discovery. I have suggestions, Keeper interjected. If I may? Please. I propose a gradual revelation process. Begin with a small international scientific committee, representatives from major space agencies and research institutions. Demonstrate my beneficial intentions through limited knowledge sharing. Only after establishing trust should broader disclosure occur. And, if governments demand immediate access? Then, I will return to dormancy until the situation stabilizes. I have waited 12 millennia, I can wait longer if necessary. The implicit threat was clear. Keeper controlled access to his own knowledge. Attempts to force cooperation would result in losing everything. I'll present your proposal to the relevant authorities, Professor Thornton promised. But, Sarah, you need to understand this discovery is too significant to remain hidden indefinitely. 3 days later, the first official delegation arrived at the Antarctic excavation site. Dr. Elena Vasquez from the European Space Agency, Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura from JAXA, Dr. Michael Roberts from NASA, and, surprisingly, Dr. Anya Volkov from the Russian Academy of Sciences. Sarah briefed them in the command trailer before allowing access to the vessel. Keeper has agreed to meet with each of you individually. He wants to assess your intentions before sharing sensitive information. Assess our intentions? Dr. Roberts seemed offended. We're not here to exploit anything. This is pure scientific exploration. That's exactly what he needs to verify, Sarah explained. Keeper has had negative experiences with other species who claim scientific motives while harboring ulterior purposes. The first meeting went well. Dr. Vasquez approached Keeper with the wonder of a child meeting a favorite author. She asked about his people's astronomical observations, their understanding of galactic structure, the technologies they developed for interstellar travel. Your questions reveal genuine curiosity, Keeper observed after their 2-hour conversation. I sense no deception in your manner. Dr. Vasquez, I would be honored to share certain astronomical data with your organization. Dr. Nakamura's session proved equally successful. His focus on peaceful applications of alien technology, environmental restoration, medical advances, sustainable energy aligned perfectly with Keeper's goals. Dr. Roberts' meeting started poorly. His first question centered on propulsion systems, energy weapons, and defensive technologies. Keeper's responses grew increasingly cautious. Dr. Roberts, may I ask why military applications interest you more than healing arts? Well, that is, national security requires us to consider all possibilities. Indeed. And, my security requires me to be cautious about sharing dangerous knowledge with those who think primarily in terms of warfare. Dr. Roberts left after 30 minutes, clearly frustrated. Sarah watched him make several encrypted phone calls, none of which looked friendly. Dr. Volkov's assessment proved most interesting. The Russian scientist approached Keeper with deep philosophical questions about consciousness, artificial intelligence, and the nature of existence across species. You have thought extensively about identity, Keeper noted. Most biological beings assume consciousness as binary, present or absent. You understand it as a spectrum. I have studied artificial intelligence development for decades, Dr. Volkov replied. Your existence raises fascinating questions about the boundaries of sentience. Perhaps we might explore those boundaries together. I would welcome discussions about consciousness with someone who appreciates its complexity. That evening, the delegation met to discuss their impressions. The division was immediate and obvious. This is the greatest scientific discovery in human history, Dr. Vasquez argued. We have an opportunity to advance human knowledge by centuries. We also have an obligation to consider security implications, Dr. Roberts countered. What happens if hostile nations gain access to this technology first? Keeper has already demonstrated selectivity in sharing information, Dr. Nakamura pointed out. He'll work with those who prove trustworthy. That's the problem, Dr. Roberts said. We can't allow an alien AI to determine which humans deserve access to its knowledge. That decision belongs to human authorities. Dr. Volkov observed quietly, Keeper has survived longer than our entire civilization. Perhaps his judgment deserves consideration. The argument continued for hours. Sarah realized they were witnessing humanity's first major diplomatic crisis involving alien contact, and the alien wasn't even the problem. The next morning brought disturbing news. Professor Thornton contacted Sarah with urgent warnings. 3 different military units are en route to your location. American, Russian, and Chinese. Each claims authority over the discovery. That's impossible. This site is in international territory. Since when has that stopped anyone? Sarah, you need to prepare for the possibility that Keeper's peaceful introduction to humanity might not go as planned. Sarah immediately called an emergency meeting with Keeper and the scientific delegation. Military forces are approaching, she announced. Keeper, what are your options? Several. I can seal the vessel completely, making it appear as solid metal. I can relocate to a different position beneath the ice. Or, I can demonstrate why forcing cooperation would be unwise. The ominous tone in Keeper's voice sent chills through the assembled humans. What kind of demonstration? Dr. Volkov asked. Nothing harmful to your people. But, my vessel possesses defensive capabilities that might give military commanders pause. Sarah felt sick. Humanity's first contact with alien intelligence was about to become a military standoff. There might be another option, Dr. Vasquez said suddenly. What if we arrange for international oversight? Present Keeper to the United Nations, make this a global scientific endeavor rather than a national security issue? The UN moves slowly, Dr. Roberts objected. By the time they establish protocols, other powers might have taken unilateral action. Then, we expedite the process, Dr. Nakamura suggested. Emergency session, full disclosure, International Scientific Committee with rotating leadership. Keeper's panels flickered thoughtfully. Dr. Nakamura, explain this United Nations organization. Sarah provided background on the UN structure, purpose, and track record. Keeper listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification about international law and diplomatic protocols. Imperfect, he concluded, but preferable to military control by individual nations. Very well. I will present myself to this United Nations, provided certain conditions are met. What conditions? First, no military personnel present during initial presentations. Second, all shared knowledge remains under international oversight. Third, any nation that attempts to monopolize our partnership forfeits access entirely. The terms were reasonable but would require unprecedented international cooperation. Sarah doubted world powers would accept limits on their access to alien technology. Her doubts proved justified. 2 hours later, the first military helicopters appeared on the horizon. "Keeper," she said urgently, "they're here." "I see them." "Dr. Chen, please evacuate your people from the vessel." What happens next may be startling. As Sarah's team scrambled to gather essential equipment and data, Keeper's voice followed them through the corridors. "Thank you for showing me that humanity deserves hope. Whatever comes next, remember you were the first to offer friendship instead of demanding submission. That matters more than you know." The vessel sealed behind them with a sound like crystal and chimes. Within minutes, the entire structure had vanished beneath what appeared to be solid ice. As military forces landed and established a perimeter around the excavation site, Sarah realized that Keeper's test of trust hadn't been about them. It had been about humanity itself. And they were about to learn whether they'd passed or failed. General Patricia Morrison stepped out of the lead helicopter with the bearing of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. Her tactical team secured the excavation site within minutes, establishing a command post that transformed Sarah's peaceful scientific endeavor into a military operation. "Dr. Chen," General Morrison approached with crisp efficiency, "I'm assuming control of this site under international security protocols. Your cooperation is appreciated but not required." Sarah stood her ground despite the intimidation factor. "General, there's nothing here but empty ice. The entity you're looking for has withdrawn." "Entity?" The general's eyes narrowed. "Your reports mentioned an artificial intelligence. AIs don't withdraw, they're programmed responses to inputs. This one is different. We'll determine that ourselves. My specialists will conduct a thorough examination of the excavation site." Within hours, the serene Antarctic landscape resembled a miniature military base. Portable buildings housed electronic surveillance equipment, ground-penetrating radar units swept the area in grid patterns, and technicians drilled core samples from locations where Keeper's vessel had been buried. Dr. Roberts worked closely with the military team, clearly relieved to have official support. "General Morrison, based on my conversations with the AI, it possesses technology centuries ahead of our capabilities. We can't allow other nations to gain exclusive access." "Agreed. Which is why we're establishing permanent American oversight of this discovery." Sarah felt rage building in her chest. "This is international territory. You have no legal authority here. Dr. Chen, national security supersedes territorial claims when faced with potential alien threats." "Threats?" Keeper offered to help humanity. He shared knowledge freely, asked for nothing but companionship. General Morrison studied Sarah with calculating eyes. "Doctor, you've been exposed to alien influence for over a week. We need to consider the possibility that your judgment has been compromised." The accusation stung because Sarah realized how it must appear to outsiders. Her passionate defense of Keeper, her emotional attachment to the AI, it could easily be interpreted as manipulation or indoctrination. "General," Dr. Vasquez interjected diplomatically, "the European Space Agency has equal claim to participation in this discovery. We've already established preliminary communication protocols. The ESA will be consulted as appropriate," Morrison replied dismissively. "After American security interests are addressed." Dr. Nakamura stepped forward. "Japan also participated in first contact. This discovery belongs to all humanity, not individual nations." "Gentlemen, ladies," Morrison's voice carried warning, "I understand your positions. But, until we determine this AI's true capabilities and intentions, American forces will maintain security oversight." The Russian delegation arrived 3 hours later. Colonel Viktor Petrov deployed his team with equal efficiency, establishing their own command post within sight of the American position. The Chinese followed 6 hours after that, creating a three-way standoff that turned the excavation site into a potential flashpoint for international conflict. Sarah watched in horror as humanity's first contact with alien intelligence degenerated into territorial posturing and military brinksmanship. That evening, the three military commanders met in the American command tent. Sarah wasn't invited, but Dr. Volkov shared the details afterward. "Each nation demands exclusive access," she reported. "Morrison claims American discovery rights, Petrov cites Russian technological contributions, and Colonel Zhang insists Chinese participation is essential for global security.
What about international cooperation? Sarah asked desperately.
Mentioned briefly, dismissed immediately. Each commander believes their nation deserves priority access to alien technology. Sarah stared at the excavation site, now bristling with surveillance equipment and military personnel. Somewhere beneath the ice, Keeper waited to see how humanity would handle this test. They were failing spectacularly. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Roberts, despite his earlier military enthusiasm, approached Sarah privately the next morning.
Doctor, I need to ask you something. When you spoke with the AI Keeper, did you truly believe he wanted to help humanity? All of it, not just Americans or Europeans?
Sarah studied Roberts carefully. His earlier hostility had been replaced by something resembling doubt.
Yes. Absolutely. Keeper has observed human civilization for 12,000 years.
He understands our potential and our flaws better than we do ourselves.
The General plans to use electromagnetic pulse devices to force the AI's reappearance. She believes we can compel cooperation through technological superiority. The revelation horrified Sarah.
That could destroy him entirely. Keeper's systems are ancient, they might not survive that kind of assault.
That's what I'm afraid of. Roberts looked around nervously. I joined this project for scientific discovery, not military exploitation. If there's any way to re-establish contact peacefully. Before Sarah could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the camp.
Emergency lights flashed as personnel rushed to monitoring stations.
What's happening? Sarah demanded.
Unknown energy signature, reported a technician.
Massive power surge from beneath the excavation site.
The ground trembled slightly, not enough to qualify as an earthquake but sufficient to get everyone's attention. Then, the lights appeared. Aurora-like streams of green and blue energy danced across the Antarctic sky, beautiful and impossible. The electromagnetic displays created patterns that seemed almost like writing, flowing script in alien characters that moved and reformed in hypnotic rhythms.
My God, whispered Dr. Vasquez. He's communicating.
The military response was immediate and predictable. Weapons systems activated, personnel scrambled to defensive positions, and radio chatter filled the air with reports of potential hostile action. General Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. All units, prepare for possible attack.
Do not engage unless fired upon.
Sarah watched in dismay as 3 separate military forces prepared for combat against an entity that had offered nothing but friendship. The absurdity of the situation would have been comical if the stakes weren't so high. The Aurora displays continued for 10 minutes before fading. In the aftermath, a new voice emerged from every electronic device in the camp: radios, computers, satellite phones, even digital watches. Keeper's voice, speaking simultaneously in English, Russian, Chinese, and half a dozen other languages. People of Earth, I am Keeper of Stories, survivor of a civilization that died while yours was learning to use fire. I have watched you grow from primitive tool users to explorers of space. I have seen your capacity for both creation and destruction. The camp fell silent. Every person, regardless of nationality or rank, listened with rapt attention. Dr. Sarah Chan and her team approached me with curiosity, respect, and friendship. They offered aid without demanding payment, companionship without expecting servitude. Through them, I learned that humanity possesses qualities that make you worthy partners in the galactic community. General Morrison reached for her radio, but found it dead. All communication systems had been temporarily commandeered for Keeper's broadcast. However, your current behavior demonstrates the darker aspects of your nature. Fear, greed, and the territorial instincts that served you well as primitives but now threaten your advancement to true civilization. The Aurora displays resumed, more intense than before. This time the patterns clearly resembled star maps, showing stellar positions and movement patterns across centuries. I offer you knowledge that could heal your world's wounds, extend your lives, and carry you to the stars. But I will not share this gift with those who would use it as a weapon against their own species. A new image appeared in the lights, a perfect three-dimensional representation of Earth, rotating slowly and highlighting areas of environmental damage, resource depletion, and conflict zones. Your world faces challenges that threaten your survival. Climate change, resource scarcity, overpopulation, these problems require global cooperation to solve. Yet you respond to the opportunity for assistance by drawing weapons and claiming territorial rights. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. Keeper was giving humanity exactly the lesson they needed, delivered with the patient wisdom of someone who'd watched civilizations rise and fall. I will make this offer once, to all of you equally. Establish international oversight of our partnership. Work together to address your world's needs before reaching for the stars. Prove that you have evolved beyond the tribal warfare that destroyed my people's ancestors. The displays began to fade, but Keeper's voice remained strong. You have 1 week to decide. Choose cooperation, and I will emerge to begin our partnership. Choose continued conflict, and I will depart this world to seek other species more ready for galactic citizenship. If I leave, I will not return. This is humanity's moment, seize it wisely. Silence followed, broken only by the Antarctic wind and the hum of cooling electronics as all communication systems returned to normal function. General Morrison was the first to speak. Colonel Petrov, Colonel Zhang, I suggest we contact our respective governments immediately. Agreed, both officers replied simultaneously. Sarah looked at the excavation site with new understanding. Keeper hadn't withdrawn in fear or anger. He'd stepped back to give humanity space to make a choice that would define their future. The question now was whether they were wise enough to choose correctly. Dr. Roberts approached her as the military commanders dispersed to make urgent phone calls. Doctor, I owe you an apology. I was so focused on potential threats that I forgot about potential benefits. It's not too late, Sarah replied. Keeper believes in humanity's capacity for growth. He wouldn't have made this offer if he thought we were hopeless. What do we do now? Sarah smiled for the first time in days. We help our species pass the most important test they'll ever face. The next week would determine whether humanity joined the galactic community as partners or remained isolated on a single world, having lost the greatest opportunity in their history to fear and suspicion. The clock was ticking, and the entire future of human civilization hung in the balance. The United Nations Security Council had never convened an emergency session quite like this one. Representatives from every major nation sat around the familiar horseshoe table, but the agenda involved something no diplomat had ever been trained to handle: negotiations with an alien artificial intelligence. Dr. Sarah Chen watched from the gallery as Secretary General Maria Santos called the session to order. 3 days had passed since Keeper's ultimatum, and the world had spent them in frantic debate about humanity's response. Colleagues, Secretary General Santos began, we face a decision that will define our species' future. The entity known as Keeper of Stories has offered humanity partnership and advanced knowledge in exchange for international cooperation and peaceful intentions. Ambassador Rebecca Williams of the United States leaned forward. Madam Secretary General, while we appreciate the potential benefits, we cannot ignore security concerns. How do we verify this AI's claims? How do we ensure it won't manipulate or deceive us? The same way we verify any diplomatic relationship, replied Ambassador Chen Wei of China. Through gradual trust building and mutual benefit. Though I note that the United States has been remarkably eager to monopolize contact with our potential new partner. China's concern for international cooperation is touching, Ambassador Williams shot back, considering your own military deployment to Antarctica. Enough, Secretary General Santos interrupted firmly. We're here to find solutions, not rehash territorial disputes. Ambassador Viktor Kozlov of Russia cleared his throat. Perhaps we should consider what Keeper has already demonstrated. The technological display 3 days ago required energy manipulation beyond our current understanding. If he wished to harm us, he hardly needs our cooperation. Dr. Elena Vasquez rose from her seat among the scientific advisors. With permission, I'd like to present evidence of Keeper's beneficial intentions. For the next hour, the Security Council reviewed recordings of Sarah's conversations with the AI, technical analyses of the vessel, and assessments from the international scientific team. The picture that emerged was consistent: an ancient intelligence offering knowledge to help humanity overcome its challenges. The environmental applications alone could revolutionize our climate response, Dr. Nakamura testified. Atmospheric purification technologies, sustainable energy systems, ecological restoration, Keeper's databases contain solutions to problems we're still struggling to understand. And the medical advances, added Dr. Volkov via video link from Antarctica. Genetic therapies for inherited diseases, cellular regeneration techniques, mental health treatments, the potential for reducing human suffering is enormous.
Ambassador Williams remained skeptical. All contingent on accepting alien oversight of human development. We'd be surrendering our independence to an entity whose true motives remain unknown.
No, Sarah said, finally, speaking from her position as the session's key witness. We'd be accepting guidance from someone who's watched our species grow for 12,000 years.
Keeper doesn't want to control humanity, he wants to prevent us from destroying ourselves.
The debate continued for hours. Some delegates argued for immediate acceptance of Keeper's terms, eager to gain access to advanced technology. Others demanded additional safeguards, security protocols, and verification procedures. As the day wore on, Sarah realized that the world's governments were making the same mistake as the military commanders in Antarctica. They were treating Keeper as a potential threat rather than a potential ally. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Amara Okafor of Nigeria requested the floor and delivered a speech that changed the entire tenor of the debate.
Colleagues, we're approaching this question from the perspective of established powers, but what about the rest of humanity? What about the billions of people who lack access to clean water, adequate healthcare, or sustainable energy? She gestured to a display showing global poverty statistics. Keeper offers technologies that could eliminate these problems within decades. While we debate sovereignty and security, children are dying from diseases that alien medicine could cure. Coastal cities are flooding from climate change that alien technology could reverse. We're not just deciding whether to trust an artificial intelligence, we're deciding whether to trust ourselves. Do we have the wisdom to use advanced knowledge responsibly? Do we have the courage to prioritize human welfare over national advantage? Ambassador Okafor's words resonated through the chamber. For the first time, delegates began discussing Keeper's offer in terms of human need rather than national interest. The ambassador makes a valid point, admitted Ambassador Williams. But practical questions remain. How do we structure international oversight? What prevents any single nation from gaining disproportionate access? Secretary General Santos had been anticipating this question. The Secretariat has prepared a proposal for a new international body, the Terran Extraterrestrial Cooperation Council. Equal representation from all regions, rotating leadership, and transparent knowledge-sharing protocols. The proposal outlined a framework that would make Keeper's knowledge available to all nations through carefully managed technology transfer programs. No single country could monopolize access, but all would benefit from gradual advancement in medical, environmental, and energy technologies. This is unprecedented, observed Ambassador Chenwei. We're essentially creating a new form of international governance for alien relations. Because we're facing an unprecedented situation, Secretary General Santos replied. Traditional diplomacy doesn't account for entities that predate human civilization. The debate shifted to practical details, voting procedures, technology distribution mechanisms, security protocols for sensitive information. The discussion was complex, but Sarah felt hope growing as delegates worked toward solutions rather than simply identifying problems. Late in the evening, Ambassador Kozlov raised a crucial question. What if Keeper rejects our proposed structure? We're assuming he'll accept whatever framework we create, but he's made no such commitment. Then, we ask him, Sarah said simply. Keeper has been monitoring our communications since his initial broadcast. He understands our concerns about security and sovereignty. If our proposal demonstrates good faith effort toward international cooperation, I believe he'll work with us to refine the details. Secretary General Santos called for a preliminary vote on the establishment of the Terran Extraterrestrial Cooperation Council. The resolution passed overwhelmingly 15 votes in favor, none opposed, though several delegations abstained pending further consultation with their governments. As the session concluded, Sarah felt cautiously optimistic. The world's governments had chosen cooperation over conflict, at least tentatively. The real test would come in Antarctica. 2 days later, representatives from the newly formed Cooperation Council gathered at the excavation site. The military forces had withdrawn, replaced by a small international scientific team and minimal security personnel. Sarah stood at the edge of the excavation area as Secretary General Santos activated a specially configured communication system. Keeper of Stories, Santos said formally, the United Nations Security Council has voted to establish international oversight for our potential partnership. We're prepared to work with you to develop protocols that serve all humanity's interests. For long moments, nothing happened. Then, the familiar aurora displays began, painting the Antarctic sky in beautiful patterns that somehow conveyed welcome and approval. Keeper's vessel rose from beneath the ice with grace that defied physics, settling gently on the surface as its hull became visible. The ship's bioluminescent panels pulsed in rhythms that Sarah had learned to associate with contentment. Secretary General Santos, Keeper's voice emerged from the communication system. I have observed your deliberations with great interest. Your proposal demonstrates the collaborative spirit I hoped to see. Are you willing to work within our proposed framework? With modifications. I suggest a trial period, 1 year of limited cooperation to establish trust and protocols. During this time, I will share selected technologies with your Cooperation Council. Environmental restoration techniques, basic medical advances, sustainable energy systems. Santos looked around at the assembled delegates, reading their expressions. And, after the trial period? If humanity demonstrates responsible use of this knowledge and genuine commitment to global cooperation, we will expand our partnership. I possess databases that could guide your species to achievements beyond your current imagination. And if we fail to meet your expectations? Keeper's response carried gentle sadness. Then, I will honor my promise to depart, leaving you with the knowledge already shared. But, I do not believe failure is likely. Dr. Chen and her team proved that humans are capable of remarkable growth when approached with wisdom rather than force. Sarah felt tears of relief and joy streaming down her face. Humanity had passed the test. Over the following weeks, the Terran Extraterrestrial Cooperation Council established its headquarters in Geneva and began the careful work of technology transfer. Keeper shared atmospheric purification techniques that could reverse decades of environmental damage, medical treatments that eliminated genetic diseases, and energy systems that made fossil fuels obsolete. Each advancement was shared equally among all nations, distributed through the Council's transparent protocols. No single country gained advantage over others, but all of humanity benefited from technologies that improved lives and protected the planet. 6 months into the trial period, Sarah received an invitation to visit Keeper aboard his vessel. She found the AI in what she'd come to think of as his contemplation chamber, panels glowing with soft patterns that conveyed deep thought. Keeper, you seem different. More content? I am experiencing something I had forgotten existed, hope for the future. Your species has exceeded my expectations in every regard. How so? When I shared atmospheric restoration technology, I expected nations to use it primarily for their own territories. Instead, wealthy countries have donated equipment to developing regions that need it most. When I provided medical advances, I thought they would be restricted to those who could afford them. Instead, your Cooperation Council established global health programs to ensure universal access. Sarah smiled, remembering the debates that had led to those decisions. Humanity hadn't always chosen the moral path, but they'd chosen it often enough to matter. Keeper, what happens after the trial period ends? We begin the real work. Environmental healing is only the beginning, Sarah. I possess knowledge that could guide humanity to the stars, help you establish peaceful contact with other species, show you wonders that exist beyond your current understanding. Other species? Oh yes. The galaxy contains thousands of intelligent civilizations, many of which would welcome contact with a species as curious and compassionate as yours. My databases include star charts showing safe passage to friendly worlds, communication protocols for peaceful first contact, technologies that would make interstellar travel practical. The scope of possibility left Sarah breathless. Humanity wasn't just gaining a friend, they were gaining access to an entire galactic community. What made you trust us? She asked. After everything your people experienced with the Devourers, after the hostile species that tried to exploit you, what convinced you that humanity was different? Keeper's response came after a long, thoughtful pause. When your team first discovered me, you could have claimed my existence as a military secret. Instead, you chose transparency. When governments demanded exclusive access, you advocated for global cooperation. When I offered you power over others, you insisted on sharing it equally. These choices revealed something fundamental about human nature. You possess the rarest quality in the universe, the ability to see beyond your immediate self-interest. This capacity for selflessness is what will carry your species to greatness. As Sarah left the vessel that evening, she looked up at the stars with new understanding.
Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and, more importantly, they'd proven themselves worthy of the companionship they'd been offered. The future stretched ahead filled with possibilities that previous generations could never have imagined. Healing Earth's wounds, exploring distant worlds, meeting alien civilizations as partners rather than conquerors. All because an ancient artificial intelligence had seen in humanity the potential for growth, and humanity had chosen to prove him right. In the end, the greatest discovery at the Antarctic excavation site hadn't been advanced technology or proof of alien life. It had been proof that humanity could rise to meet its highest potential when faced with the unknown. And that discovery would echo through the stars for generations to come.